Well, the one thing I wanted to comment on too is even just on the video and some of the things people are putting on social media, it seemed like they didn't want we the people there, and I
Yes.
tried to convey that probably not as nicely as I could have in some Facebook posts
Yes.
to some particular people here in Kootenai County by
Right.
email. I
And it
think
was
I
true.
think
We
that
felt that.
person knows who that was, but I that's what I could see from the
Right.
video.
And we felt that way. We felt that we weren't wanted there. And by them restricting our public testimony and being able to substitute or cede our time to other people, that came across pretty clearly. They didn't really want us to be there. And I know that it slows down their process a little bit, and they probably were concerned with time because everything was taking so much longer with all these people. But it is a right of the people to be a part of this process. And I'm sorry to the legislative branch and the Senate that we haven't been a part of that more before now. But I believe it's going to change probably forever from this point forward, and this is to be expected now going forward, that we are going to be a part of the process. There are going to be many of us that will be there on a regular basis for these things that are important. So the immunity bill, it became clear that they were going to pass one.
And that's what I didn't understand until conversations afterwards,
Yes.
because I was texting one of our local people going, I thought we weren't going to pass this at all.
Right.
Why did you
Why
just
is it
vote
passing?
for this?
It became
People are
clear.
asking me on social media, why are we passing that? So
Right.
now, yeah.
And so the interesting part that I learned about that is that there were 6 total bills that were proposed for immunity, and that my understanding, and I hope if I'm incorrect, I'm sorry, was that 5 of them came from Chairman, or 4 came from Chairman Shady, and then the 5th one was from Representative Young, and then the 6th one was from Representative Young, and it was to narrow the scope of the first 4 bills. Was the point, was to take the government part out so the government wouldn't have immunity. And so the first 4 bills were broad and way too broad. They're just covering too much. Whereas the 5th and 6th bills were to narrow down who gets immunity. And that was my understanding.
COVID immunity.
COVID immunity.
So
Yeah.
sue over COVID.
Yes, COVID
Yeah.
immunity or mutations of COVID, which is pretty sketchy because COVID-19 has the 19 in front of it because there are 18 other strains.
Yeah.
Right? So mutations of, it covers a lot of things, and other strains of COVID are just like a common cold, is my understanding. And so that being said, can you get sued over having the common cold? Like it became not clear when they said and mutations of. And one of the things that it said in there is that, you know, businesses would need to have best practices to keep people from getting sick. And one of the questions was, you know, what's the best practice, or what's the, if you put it in layman's terms, what do I have to do that's considered to be the best to my ability to keep people safe? And that is a gray area because it can be interpreted from somebody who reads the bill as
following the mask mandate.
If you follow the mask mandate and you enforce masks regardless of ADA requirements. If the future vaccine comes and government says it's going to be safest to have a vaccine, does that now mean that I need to require my customers in my office to get the vaccine? And if they don't show proof, that I'm not showing that I'm being as safe as I could be?
Yeah, and that was a lot of the concern that I was
Yes.
seeing, at least for our area.
Right,
online.
and Representative Young was really kind and took some time to talk to us in between. They paused. I don't know what they call it in Robert's rules, but they
at ease.
Yeah,
or
at
something,
ease.
Which
It went at ease.
I was
Yes.
like, are we military? Because
know.
at ease is like
Very
a military
confusing.
thing. I was like, that's odd, but I think it's because
Yes.
they're not dismissing for the day, so it's kind of like a pause.
Yeah, it's like a pause. It was like a pause, and so
Yeah.
they would say for 15 minutes or whatever, and so we'd all run around and kind of not tackle the legislative reps, but like corner them a little bit to try to get some answers.
Fangirl them?
Yeah, kind of fangirl, exactly. And not aggressively by any means. It was more like, hey, we have this question. What do you think? Or, hey, this is something I really feel strongly. What do you think about this? And it was really just a chance to get to know them. And the ones that talked to us were very open and seemed to be being honest with us. And they seemed like they genuinely wanted to talk to us. Like they wanted to hear what we had to say, which was surprising to me because I thought, well, I didn't like what you said before. And I was kind of angry with you, but now I kind of want to like you. You know, which is confusing because they seem like real people and they took time to talk to us. And that's all we wanted to do was to be heard and to have a real genuine conversation. The ones that refused to talk to us, it was obvious they didn't care what we had to say or didn't want us there. And as you realize that they didn't want to talk to you in the hallways during the at ease moments or whatever, and then you watch them in the stands and the way they talked to you and the questions that they asked, it seemed pretty obvious that you could deduce that they didn't want you to be there. They didn't care what you had to say. And so for future legislative sessions, it would be a warning to those people that they should probably come talk to the people that are here supporting them, representing them, who are part of the people, and hear what we have to say. I think it's important.
Well, and maybe they're used to people that can drive a half an hour and be home.
Maybe.
I would think, especially me being the way I am, if I drove 8 hours, I'm going to get you to talk to me.
Yes.
I drove all the way from
Yes.
Coeur d'Alene. I want to talk to you.
Yeah, this is important.
And if I didn't know I needed to make an appointment, I shouldn't be ignored.
Yes,
you know?
Because I don't know how it works. And if the public is in a learning curve, then educate us. Talk to us and let us know how it works. So that we can be present and follow the decorum and follow the rules. And we're more than happy to do that as long as we're also being respected. And on Tuesday, Chairman Cheney, he would pause the sessions if he felt we were had too many outbursts, or even if we were kind of quiet under our breath.
I do think I see some of that video, and I couldn't tell if he was being reasonable or not, because the video, I'm like, gosh, he seems like he's overreacting. But then I thought, this is like the other chamber. I can't see or hear.
Everything.
What's going on?
Because you're seeing them, but you're not seeing the panned out view of all the people back there. And sometimes when they would say things, we would start shaking our heads to like show what we felt, because we couldn't have these outbursts. And sometimes people would say things they didn't agree with, and they would have an outburst or something, and it wasn't proper decorum. I know that. But the people were very passionate, and after the full day on Monday of frustration after frustration after frustration, it was kind of building on Tuesday, people who came back a second day and who were still feeling unheard or not respected. And then Chairman Cheney, I was in my daughter's kindergarten classroom, okay? When they don't listen, they make you sit, and everybody has to sit quietly, and there's this punishment few minutes where everybody has to sit quietly and listen, and then we can go on to the next activity. And they'll say, well, everybody would just be quiet, we can go on to the next thing. And it was like this carrot, dangle this, and then if you're just quiet and you behave, then we can have this. And that's the way I felt Chairman Cheney had treated us. And I leaned over and told my friend at the time, like, are we kindergartners? Is this what's happening right now? It very much to me and to some people in the audience felt like he was treating us like we were little kids who were being put in timeout, and there was this clock ticking. If you have this much time till this time, we are adjourning at this time. And regardless of if we heard you or not, we're adjourning. It's up to you to be quiet and be good little kids and sit still and do what we're told to tell you to do, and then you can have all this time to talk. And if you don't, we're going to adjourn and go at ease for 5 minutes. And that's your time that now you're wasting, pretty much is the way he treated us. And it was appalling to be treated that way as adults, and that he had all this power to do whatever he wanted. And like I said, they never explained a lot of things to us. It took a lot of time for us to learn, that built up that frustration that they could have done differently. And so from that perspective, how do you expect the public to learn how to behave and how to do things and then practice it when you don't give them the time to do that?
Well, and I've been to some, I think with the Panhandle Health meetings and some of the county meetings I've been to, you get that impression, whether it's meant that way or not.
Yes.
And you assume I know what you're talking about, what the abbreviations mean, and what the rules are.
Right.
They can either have a printout or go, for those of you that don't know, this is how we do things, especially with the Panhandle Health meeting, where they were not expecting, 200-300 people to show up at a meeting in a very small room.
Yes. And if they see people that they don't see all the time, and if you go every week or every time they have a meeting somewhere and they see your face, they probably know you know most of the rules.
Right.
But when I show up and they've never seen me before, they could just say, and for those of you that don't understand or don't know, and give their little 2-second spiel. It doesn't have to take very long, or a 2-minute explanation. And so they could have done that, and if they realized on Monday we didn't know, why didn't they say something on Tuesday? And I think that most of us were really trying hard to understand the legislative process. I was asking a lot of questions. I asked people in the hallways that I knew worked at the state capitol. I was going to people for information, people I didn't know, just asking, I understand this and this. Is this correct? Now what happens next? Where do we go from here? Why are we going back and forth from room to room? And is this part of the normal process, or is this something special for this special legislative session? I don't understand. And I was getting my words mixed up and getting confused on whether it was a bill versus, this just a recommendation basically to the governor, or all the different words they used. A resolution. A resolution is kind of like a recommendation to my understanding. So what's a resolution compared to a bill, and why is it different? And who decided that it was going to be a resolution versus a bill? And just trying to get through all of that gobbledygook that we normally don't even really focus on, so that when they were talking to me, I could understand, or talking to the group, I could understand what they were saying and to start following the process a little bit more. So there was a lot of unknowns, and the legislative branch and the Senate, they couldn't have known we, the people, didn't know all of that necessarily. I don't think they could have assumed to know we didn't know all of that, but it would have been nice had we had a chance to say, this is all confusing, could you just clarify what's going on? And so as we the people, we probably could have gone to some reps beforehand and said, this is some things we don't understand, but you don't know you don't understand it until you're in the middle of it.
Right.
You're not getting it. So there was really not a very good way to show that. And if they would have been watching, maybe they could have said, hey, we recognize this is happening. There's a lot of confusion. But what I learned from this process, and I don't want to point fingers that they're all bad or that they purposefully made it awful. I think a handful of people there purposely made it awful. I think Chairman Cheney purposefully power tripped on Tuesday at the end of the day in the Lincoln Auditorium when he said that the press could not sit at the press table because they didn't have some special press pass that was preordained to them beforehand. They had press passes from a certain organization, but not the one that they favored. That was my understanding. And so when Misty and Brian went over and wanted to sit there, I was told that they were told before the meeting they couldn't sit at the press table right in front. Well,
even though on a previous day they'd have been up in the special press section across from what I would call the peanut gallery.
Yes, they had been in a special press section there, and they had been there many times before here at the state capitol. So that's reasonable
for them to assume they get press treatment again,
And what was weird is the other agencies that are the public agencies, the mainstream media, they were there on both sides in front of the section where the other special press section was. There's a big long countertop kind of thing where you can sit at. Yeah. And they were in front of that. So they call it preferential seat or vantage point, where you get the best vantage point of what's going on. You can sit there as a press, and then you can get up close. You can hear everybody. You get a good view of everything. So they already had preferential treatment better than the rest of the press who would sit at that special kind of table.
Well, the thing I don't understand is like when Panhandle Health, when they had their vote, there were 2 people that the sheriffs would not let in.
Yes.
And they said, hey, we know we're not KREM, KHQ, but they said, may we come in? The sheriff that was at the door said, give me 5 minutes.
Yes.
I don't make that decision. They were let in.
Yes.
So to me, it's like, well, if you ask nicely, why wouldn't they just let them in? Because it's logical to assume, well, if I got to be pressed the day before, why wouldn't I be pressed here?
Yes, and it made sense to everybody else in the audience, which is why we were really upset that they had already been reviewing and recording all of the meetings everywhere and sitting in special press seats. So immediately the crowd, of course, got angry. We had expected that it was reasonable for these people to sit in this spot. Why on this one meeting did Chairman Cheney suddenly decide, nope, you can't sit there, sorry? That didn't make any sense to what we were previously experiencing. Second of all, the mainstream media hasn't been giving us the true picture of what's happening at these meetings. They're giving a certain narrative, is what we've been realizing. Because of me being present and then seeing what they actually put onto mainstream media on TV, I can see that they're not showing the whole picture because I was there. And what I see them putting on and reporting on the news is not what was actually happening, not the whole picture. And when you put the whole picture in and you don't cut and paste the little bits you want to show, it really does give you a better understanding of what was going on that day. So we weren't rioters, we weren't protesters, and if you were showing us sitting out there asking questions, taking maybe interviews in the hallways of us, why are you here? What's going on? Why weren't we ever asked by mainstream media, why are you here? Why weren't they talking to the people to see what was going on? They didn't want to show us as peaceful. They didn't want to show us as concerned citizens who have a right to be there in our state house. So we needed these press people there to show the real picture. They were going on talking to people, interviewing people everywhere for hours every day. So they could show everything that was going on and all different people's perspectives, for, against, lobbyists, everybody were getting interviewed. So why not show that on mainstream media? And so the fact that when this happened and they were told they couldn't, they went and sat down in the front row. And then when the meeting started, I think that they had some kind of discussion, is my understanding, and they decided, you know what, this isn't right. We have a right to sit at this table. We have sat there before. We were thinking of just sitting back and just saying, maybe we won't sit there. And I think they just decided this is ridiculous. We've got to sit up for the rights that we have to be citizen journalists and to show what's really going on, and they can't push us around. This is ridiculous. And so they went and sat over there. When Chairman Cheney saw that, he paused and he looked at them. You can see it on all the videos, and said, you can't be here. And they were asking questions, and he immediately called the ISP to come down, who, remember, the second day had doubled in their numbers and was very intimidating. They were very intimidating, and I think they meant to do it on purpose to kind of things.
No, see, you had said that, and other people had said that. I felt like they look intimidating because of the masks, not because of anything else. Because it's like you could barely see their eyeballs with their, as I call it, like the.
Yes.
I feel like it's kind of like the Smokey the Bear hat.
Yes, it is true. They were very intimidating for multiple reasons. Number one, because there were so many of them, and they were for the most part unfriendly. And typically, those police are just there, and they're just good people. They're willing to talk to you and conversate and whatnot. They were very unfriendly, and there were so many in a very small space in that corridor, and they had their masks on, and they were really just cold. It was very military style, and it was scary. My kids were afraid of the ISP and wanted to know why they were there, and so it was very unnerving that my children were even afraid of the ISP.
And full disclosure, we are both very pro-cop.
Yes,
I've been the blue line.
I have been, yes.
Yes.
I've been showing my kids up to these defend the Back the Blue rallies and things, and so we have been. But at those ones, the guys reach down and shake the kids' hands, talk to them, try to get them to laugh, ask them silly questions. They get to be very kind of soft in that sense with my children. And I have video of them doing this at other Back the Blue rallies. This was not that.
Yeah.
This was very much us and you. And it felt very cold, and I was surprised. I didn't come expecting that. I figured they might have some there just as safety, because these are hot topics. People are passionate. It might be safe to have a handful of police officers there just to make sure nobody gets out of hand. That's reasonable in my opinion, just because people get passionate, and this is a political time where things are very high, feelings are very high. So I could understand that to protect maybe the people that are governing, because they might feel a little bit threatened by people that could come in and to any place in the state and be a little bit crazy over all this stuff. That would have been okay, and I could have understood that.
Yeah.
But when they came in such force, in 29 ISP in one corridor, with 30 or 50 other people that are there, some of those with kids, strollers, families that were there, it seemed extreme to me. And then you add the fact that you couldn't tell who they were. They were all wearing masks. So they all kind of looked the same. They were all wearing the same black masks. It just seemed very stormtrooper is something I could think of. So like a stormtrooper. It was really creepy. And so the fact that when we would talk to sometimes some of them would talk, many of them wouldn't.
Well, and we may have there may be a different attitude even up here. I feel like I don't interact with Idaho State Patrol as much.
Right.
When I do have interactions.
Maybe with Coeur d'Alene PD or something.
Coeur d'Alene PD, Kootenai Sheriff, Post Falls, they have a different demeanor. Like you can tell at public meetings, they're like, this is business.
Yes.
You will do as we say.
Right.
But I know they have a good heart behind it. And when it's at the Capitol building, it's so cold and impersonal.
It was really impersonal, right? So, we just dealt with it. And I tried to not let it bother us and just ignore what was going on. And I wasn't doing anything wrong. So I didn't have to worry about being arrested or something, because I knew I wasn't doing anything wrong. I tended to the kids, listened to the meetings, tried to be quiet when I was asked to be quiet, basic stuff. And so when that happened, the Lincoln Auditorium was such a disaster for so many reasons. When they went over and the Chairman Cheney called and said, could the folks at the end of the back of the room that are here to support us or whatever come back and remove them? It was very obvious he was talking to the ISP and told them to come down and remove these people. And so a bunch of them came down the middle aisle, and all of a sudden the entire room, the energy changed in the whole room, and you could tell something was going to happen, but you didn't know what it was. I was 3 rows from the front with the kids over here, and my friend had gone to the car to get her kids' lunches, because the meeting hadn't quite started. It was just getting ready to, so it was a good time to get out, before we got all quiet and testimony. And so I had all these kids, I had 8 kids here or something in a row. And I looked over, and the ISP are coming down here, and I'm like, I better grab my phone. I want to, whatever's going to happen, I want to get it on video, because I want to get it from the real perspective. So I hollered at my daughter to get it and turned around, got my phone, got it up, and I was videoing, and I realized I had to pass the phone off. I had to take care of the kids, make sure they're okay. When I went to turn around to do that, all of a sudden my daughter was on my left, my 4-year-old, and apparently I didn't see, but she got to the end of the aisle to peek around to see what all the police were doing in here, because it was a big commotion. They were walking in, 2 by 2 by 2 in formation down the middle aisle, and she wanted to see. And so I was 3 seats in, so she just walked over 3 seats and was like, oh, what's going on around the seats? And I didn't know at the time, but I found out afterwards from my older daughter, who's 12, that this is what had happened, and that she started crying. So I had turned from giving the phone over here, and Bailey had just gone over here, and I'm like, what is going on? I thought she was just afraid, so I put her over here, and she was screaming. Well, at the same time, the other little boy I was watching started just screaming. He was a little younger than she was. And I'm like, what is happening? I mean, it's chaotic. People started yelling. I thought they were just afraid. So I put them on my knee, grabbed my daughter, put her over here on my knee, and I'm hugging them, trying to calm them and reassure them that it's okay. I got you. You're safe. Everything's all right. I didn't realize that Bailey had gotten knocked over as the ISP had come back up the aisle carrying Brian with extreme force, in my opinion. He wasn't resisting arrest. He just was trying to get his things, and knocked her over, and she hurt her knees. And I hadn't seen that, but my 12-year-old had seen it and told me that's what happened. And then it made sense why she was saying, I'm so afraid. I want to get out of here. I want to leave, Mom. This is scary. Because they knocked her over and didn't stop to see if she was okay or apologize or anything.
They may not have even noticed.
That's what I wondered. Maybe they didn't even notice, because there was one of the guys tripped, and I'm not sure if he tripped over Bailey, who was there, or it was the other person's foot who was standing close by, because I could see in both videos when I watched them afterwards, it could have been either one. And so there was a guy that was at the top looking down the aisle where the ISP were coming up, and they pushed him kind of out of the way. Well, he was one of the ones that was later arrested, Aaron, and they deleted his video on his phone when they arrested him. And he would have been probably one of the only other people that I would know that would have seen down there if that happened to Bailey as they were coming up, because I didn't see anybody else at the top filming. And so I don't know if that was what was on there or not, but they deleted it, so we'll never know. And so she was screaming and he was screaming, and finally the other mom came back in and got to help with the kids. But in the meantime, Representative Young came over, and she was trying to calm the kids and calm them down and see if they were okay. And a lady came from behind and were checking on me with the kids to make sure they were okay, because on the other side of the room, people were really yelling. They were screaming and they were angry that this was happening, and they believed that it was unconstitutional and that these officers were not acting within the bounds of the law. And I know that we can argue that all day long, but that's a topic that should be discussed further, but I don't want to do it on video now. But I feel like that's what was going on. So if anybody wants to know the truth of what was going on, that was what was happening. Misty got up, and for some reason they didn't arrest her or try to arrest her and take her out with by police force, but they did with Brian. And when I watched the video from all different angles, I still don't understand why they just chose one over the other. It didn't really make sense to me. And so they took him out, and so the whole meeting erupted, and slowly, one by one, each of the legislative reps started leaving. And we knew that the meeting wasn't going to happen. That's when we were supposed to give our testimony. And that's when Ammon Bundy went and sat down in where the press were sitting and said, I think he decided he was going to take a stand because this was wrong. And so he made that decision on his own, and nobody knew that was going to happen. And then we heard from somebody that said, hey, I just saw a bunch of the ISP running off down the hallway. I followed them. They're down at the other room starting the meeting down there. So we weren't told that the meeting was necessarily going to be held down there. We were just all of a sudden found out. And we learned after Monday that anytime that you saw a big group of ISP walking down the hallway, if you followed them, you could find out where the next meeting was. That was our cue, because they were headed down to protect the meeting room that was going to be going on in the next place. And so we could head down there. And so a bunch of us decided to gather up all our things and head down there and see what was going on and try to be a part of the meeting and get back to our public testimony part. And so we had done that, and I'd heard that there was something going on in the Lincoln Auditorium with Ammon, and that he was standing his ground and wasn't going to come out or whatever, and that he might be arrested. And so a bunch of us were at the other meeting partaking in that while that was happening in the Lincoln Auditorium. So we were separated. That explains
why it was so cleared out at the time.
Right.
I didn't quite understand that, and then I realized when you go back and watch the video that the legislature puts on,
yes,
they take out a lot of the at ease time.
Yes.
Which I don't blame them, because
it makes it long.
It would make it really long, and yes, they do leave some of it in, but then it's like with that room, you miss out on what happened.
You do. Seeing it from TV, you don't get to see the addies and who's talking to who. Certain people would go talk to somebody real quietly up there, and they would talk. They would discuss what was just happening or whatever, what was just talked about, and they would be having private. I'm sure they're swapping private opinions, right? You don't get to see any of that, and getting to see who's talking to who is part of learning who works with who gets along. Or, whatever. There's just things you can deduce from those types of conversations where you can see who's talking to who and who's angry, who's happy. Kind of just get to see their demeanor, and it kind of helps when you're talking to people to kind of know where they stand on things. And so that's all cut out, and when you get to see that on TV. But being there in person was really helpful, and that's when people would sometimes come out and talk to you. And you don't get to see much of that on video. They don't record all of that. I didn't record our conversation with Representative Young because I didn't want to seem combative by shoving a phone in her face, which a lot of people did, and I'm not saying they shouldn't do it or should do it, but I didn't want to come across that way, so I didn't record our conversation. But we had a good 10 or 15-minute conversation with about 8 of us standing around her in the room where they were having the meeting while it was on pause. And she answered a bunch of our questions, and we shared our concerns with her. And I took away from that she seems like a good person. Representative Young, she's down south. I forget the district that she's in. I looked it up. But she believed that her bill narrowed down and took away government immunity and narrowed down to a very limited immunity for businesses and hospitals and schools, that they deserve to have that immunity, and that it helps protect them. But one of our arguments that still wasn't really never solved, I guess, if it was like a question to be solved, was schools don't get sued for common colds these days. We don't sue the school when my kid comes home with strep throat and then the flu next week and then whatever the next week. There's always those happening at schools. We don't sue schools for that. I don't blame the schools when that happens. I wish they would take more kids and tell them you have to stay home, but I don't sue them over that, and I don't think most people do that. So why would you need protection from COVID? And that was one of the main concerns that constituents had there. Why do you need this? We don't sue you already. So we taught kids to go back to school, and if they get sick, they get sick. It's not a big deal. And one of the other things was that if they did this, then would people care as much to try hard to be safe? If they have immunity, maybe they wouldn't try as hard to be safe. So whenever you give somebody immunity from anything, that causes them to maybe have to try less or be less vigilant and be less careful. And so that was something that we talked about a lot in the halls with the senators and legislative reps, was our concern over that. And just how broad the verbiage was. She did read some definitions on what people means, and what her understanding and her intent of the bill was. But my argument was, I said, Representative Young, your intent is good, and I applaud you for that. But what about when people don't read or watch this interview, and they don't watch the session, and they just look at the bill and they interpret it for what they think it means? You're going to have division among the people. And that's important because we already have a lot of division among the people and businesses. Some people accept ADA exemptions, some don't. Regardless of if it's right or wrong, they're doing this anyways. This is already happening. I'm speaking to you from somebody who does a lot of shopping. I have a large family. I go a lot of places. I'm telling you, the places that aren't agreeing on things, your bill leaves for division. And I think that if you don't want that, you need to narrow it down. And she said, well, that's a good point. I can see some of the things that you're saying. I'll talk to my attorney about it. But we could tell already that the day they were going to decide about the immunity bill regardless. There wasn't going to be time to talk to an attorney. They weren't going to go home and spend weeks deciding this. And so while it was nice for her to say that, I knew that wasn't realistic, because they were there to discuss it and decide. But it was nice that she listened and she saw our concerns and she heard them, but she didn't think people would take her bill and vilify it in their own way. They would just take it for what it's supposed to be. And I thought, well, you have too much faith in people. People are going to decide for themselves what they think it means, regardless of what your intent was. And if you put a statement of intent written into the bill, it would clarify that. This is not meant you have to mask mandate. This is not meant you have to vaccine mandate. You decide as a business what you feel is safest, and that gives you immunity. But that's not the way the bill is going to be read. And we all knew that, and we talked about it, and some people gave testimony to that. If you go back and watch the testimony, we also heard that in testimony. So they heard from us, and they knew. Now, if this happens in the future, we don't have much recourse because they put together this bill that protects businesses. So if they decide they want you to wear a blue mask, and the government says blue masks are safer than black masks, I know it's silly, but it's just putting the point together that they believe that's the safest way to protect. Or you have to have an N95 mask. No other mask will count, and you can't get one, then you can't shop, because that's now deemed the safest thing to do, right? So we're looking at this from all the what ifs could happen, because we have to look at that as all bills, all laws. You got to look at how can this be misunderstood or misconstrued? And so the public was just concerned about that. And I think I speak for a lot of people who were very concerned about all of those things, and we didn't really get what we wanted, but we certainly didn't want the government to have immunity, and so this bill took that out. So out of all the bills that were presented, it was pretty much a consensus from everybody I spoke to, a lot of people. Bill number 6 was the best one out of all the options. And there was one guy, and I'm sorry I can't remember his name, he spoke, and he was a lobbyist, was my understanding from his testimony, and he got to speak for a long time, which was frustrating for people, that they asked questions of him, and then he got to answer. And that was part of the process, which is a good part. But if you're going to limit us to 3 minutes apiece, and a lot of us want to give our testimony, it isn't fair to let one person have more time than everybody else if you're still going to continue to limit us. If that's the case and it takes longer, then let it spill over to the next day then, and let us give our testimony. And that was frustrating for a lot of people who felt they gave the lobbyists too much time. But he said he didn't work for IACI. He said, I don't work for them. I work with them. And we were told, and a few people.
Explain what IACI is.
I believe it's a pharmaceutical company. I didn't do a lot of research into it, but from what I was being told from other people who seem to have more knowledge than I did, and I know I should look it up myself, and I'll get to that, that there were pharmaceutical lobbyists upstairs talking with Senate members while the House was meeting and discussing this immunity bill. And we had a few people go up, and they probably have video of it. I haven't seen it, but they probably do, showing that they were up there seeing these lobbyists up there doing their job, lobbying for their companies, and it seemed to be directly related to the immunity bill because they weren't there the whole time. And so we were wondering as a public if that's what was going on and why the rush to put forth the immunity bill. And we asked that. Why now? Why right now in the special session? So one thing that happened is that there was a resolution put forth by the House, and they voted on it to end the state of emergency. So they voted on it. It went to the Senate. The Senate chair said, nope, put it in the drawer and said, we're not going to discuss this. We believe that it's illegal to do so. It's against our Constitution. The governor didn't tell us we could talk about this, so we're not going to discuss it. So you have the House branch of government who believes that it was okay and legal to bring up, and they passed it to the Senate. The Senate disagreed and said, no, we don't believe it's legal. We're putting it in the drawer, which is what they call it. Putting a bill in the drawer was when they never discuss it. And so they do a lot,
no, they didn't
of
put it in the drawer. They tabled it. There is a difference. I know, which is weird because it's not a bill. And then they passed what I consider a watered down resolution.
Yes.
And if you look at my Facebook page, I had a very strongly worded opinion for all three of our state senators.
Yes.
From Kootenai County, to whom only one has responded.
Yes. I think it's important to note. In the Senate, so what happened is the House did theirs and the Senate stomped it. And then the Senate said, we're going to put something together and we're going to try to pass it. And then it came back together and it all got passed between branches of government that, yes, we are going to try to talk about ending the emergency in the January session. That's basically what it came down to. I talked to Heather Scott afterwards and talked to Christy Zito and a couple other people there. And they said, basically, it's not a promise to end it in January. It is, we're going to do our best to discuss it and talk about ending the emergency in January. So it really means nothing, is what my understanding was from talking with other reps. Now, if I'm wrong, please correct me, any of my reps, and I'm happy to humble myself and say that I was wrong. That's my understanding. So really it means nothing. And so because the House passed it, everybody on Facebook and in the news media world was like, woohoo, it ended. You were all done. It's not done. And it was really...
We're still under the emergency order.
We're still under the emergency order. It's the same one. And people got excited because, again, we the people haven't been involved in the process to understand what it really was. When they were saying, it has to be handed over now to the Senate to be discussed, that means they have the right to stomp it out and say we're not going to do it or we are. And so I learned that in the process, like, wow, no wonder so many bills never make it through. Because both branches of the government have to agree, and they both have different perspectives and different maybe prerogatives, different personal goals on things that they want to have done. And so I started to understand why so many things that I've heard in the past didn't make it through the Senate, why that didn't happen. The Senate believes that the governor has the right to end the emergency, and that we the people don't, and the legislative members and the Senate don't have that right. Well, the House agreed we did, the Senate agreed we didn't. There's a clash of opinion there. And both sides were getting opinions legally, right? So it's confusing to the people now. Why do we have it or do we not? I have my own opinion, but I'm just looking at it from the perspective that happened there.
Well, and my frustration was even if they all voted it down, I think it deserved to be voted on, and
Absolutely.
I think the tabling was a slap in the face, and that's
it
why
was a way for
I really strongly worded my email and Facebook post to our three senators from our county, because I was like that. No one objected, and my jaw just about dropped to the floor going, where are our three?
Why didn't they
anyone object and say, look, I understand, and they might have even agreed we should vote on it anyway. Why? Because we, the people, are here and wanted to at least be voted on.
And it would be nice to know who was for ending it and who wasn't. I think that carries a lot of weight with the people. Who is wanting to end it and who doesn't. And then we can all vote accordingly in the next election, who we felt supported us and who didn't. And I think them tabling it was a way for them to not have to give a vote to the people to show them who's for it, who's against it.
It gave an appearance of not being accountable, which was super frustrating.
Right. And if that's not what they wanted to have happen, I want them to know now that's exactly how it appeared. Day 2 ended, and we had testimony that we finished giving, and then day 3 came, and we had more testimony to be had, and there wasn't enough time because of all the disruption from day 2. So we came in on day 3, and I came in a little bit later because we were really tired. I mean, really long days at the Capitol. Holy moly, they were really long. And you never knew for sure what time the next meeting was going to start because they had to go and have other things had to happen. When they had to get the bill and give it a bill number, that took time. They had to come back and discuss the bill, and then it had to go back to the House floor, and then it would have to go to the Senate committee, and then the Senate floor, and there's a lot of pieces to it, and that I didn't know about before this process. So everything took a really long time. So that being said, you were there for hours not knowing when the next one was going to be, and you didn't want to miss it. So we'd go out and have lunch or sit outside for a little while, get some fresh air, and then come back in, and you may or may not have made it on time. Or somebody might have texted you from inside and said, oh, it's starting now, come on in. There was just so much of that all day long that it was really exhausting. So on day 3, we came in a little bit late, and what I found out when I got there, which was really, really frustrating, is that they were allowing people to sign up who didn't previously have a chance to talk. But Tuesday, no go. You weren't allowed to sign up and talk. But then after all the drama of the arrests and things that happened on Tuesday, we came in and there was less ISP present. If they were there, they were often in separate rooms where it wasn't as visible. Chairman Cheney was like super nice, which was syrupy, kind of disgustingly nice to us as the public from the day before. It was kind of like a slap in the face, like, don't be nice to me after you were, in my opinion, really not very nice the day before. And then they said you could give public testimony, you could sign up if you were here in a certain window of time before the meeting. So I didn't expect that, or I would have made sure to be there on time so I could have signed up. And that was really frustrating because I assumed after day 2 that they wouldn't let us speak out on day 3 either if we hadn't already signed up. So why the change in policy? And that's hard as a public standpoint. Make a policy and stick to it. I didn't like the day before policy of not being able to sign up, but I wish I would have known to expect that on day 3 on Wednesday. And so that was frustrating, but I thought, okay, it is what it's going to be. I can't linger on that. It's whatever it is. So, and I would just go out and tell people, can you ask this question? Can you bring this up if you think about it? Can you ask this? Because I didn't get a chance to speak, and I'm curious what this is. Can you just ask these questions? And we would ask some of the reps, and at least they could know that these are questions we had, whether they asked them or not. They knew that they were things we were wondering about. And that day, some of the Senate members were out, and they were willing to talk to us in the hallway, and just, you know, whatever we had to talk about, they were willing to at least engage with us, which was really nice. It was a very long day, and when we realized we were going to be there till late, they said, we're going to be here till we're done, because I think that they all wanted to just go home, because it was supposed to be a short session, and they realized this is going on really, really long, and so we had to stay there until 9 o'clock at night before we got our final answer to make sure that this was actually going to go through, because we felt as a public, if we didn't stay there and follow through, the government, different government committees or entities might just decide to table the whole thing or continue it tomorrow, and we wouldn't know about it, so we wouldn't be there. So we didn't feel that we would get the whole story if we didn't stay. And so we felt like we had to stay till 9 o'clock at night to see the thing all the way through. And I know that sounds very distrusting, but after the way that we felt we were treated throughout the process, we didn't feel we could trust that we would get the full picture without being there in place. And so I was there at 9 o'clock, 9:06. I think they said they put it on the governor's desk in the gallery. And there were, 10 of us in the gallery at that point. So a lot of people down in the hallways, but like 10 of us in the gallery that I'm like, I want to see this through to the end. I want to know that they're going to vote on this. It's going to get finished, you know. So we were there, and what we were told by one of the representatives afterwards, they came and talked to me and said, hey, were you in the gallery at the top? And I said, yeah, because I'd seen this person several times throughout the whole time we were there, and they knew that we were staying the whole time, and it was a rep. And I said, yes, we were there. We were up in the gallery, wanted to see it through. And they said, you know what? I knew you were there. I knew you were in the room, because the Senate members kept glancing up at the gallery, and they never do that because people are never there. The gallery is usually empty.
Yeah.
And that they were unused to us being there, and they were watching our responses to what was happening. And we were being very quiet, very polite. We're following decorum to the T. I think we were too tired to do anything else, although we were very frustrated. But we were shaking our heads, letting them know we didn't like what was happening, so they could visually see that we didn't like the things that they were doing or things that they were deciding. We disagreed with them strongly. That was the only way we had to express ourselves at that point. No signs were allowed in there. I should say on day 2, they stopped allowing us to have our purses, bags, or bottles of water in the room with us. It was hot, and it was a very long process, and you weren't allowed to even have a bottle of water in the room. And you know, it's not like things were being thrown at the legislative members or anything like that, right? Or the Senate members. Nothing like that was happening. It wasn't crazy or weird. We just couldn't have them. So I kept having to leave and go out of the room with my kids to get drinks of water, come back in, which is disruptive in itself, right? To have to continue to come in. I brought in things for my kids to do so they could sit and be quiet, and I had a couple snacks and things. I could understand if they never allowed food in there, but at least a bottle of water at minimum would have been necessary, as hot as it was at the time. Parts of the building are air conditioned, parts are not. It's just very hot, moving from one room to the next.
It's an old building, from what I understand.
So the main part wasn't air conditioned, and man, you'd sweat a lot, and you needed to continue to hydrate. So it made it very uncomfortable, and many people speculated that they felt that the reason that they limited us was to make us so uncomfortable that we'd want to leave. I don't know if that's true, but it felt that way after some of the other, when you look at all the pieces, all the pieces of things that happened, and you just add one more piece into that, it has the perception that we would be made to be uncomfortable so that we would not want to be there. Now, I don't know about you, but I don't leave my purse sitting in the hallway with anybody, right? So I took my wallet out and brought my wallet in, thinking, you can say purse, but I'm bringing my wallet in. I'm not leaving my ID and my credit cards out there in the hallway. Any devices, chargers I had, things that were valuable, I had to carry in my arms and sit on the floor because I couldn't have a bag or a small purse or anything like that.
It just seems odd. You'd think they'd have dealt with that issue before.
And you'd think it would be done the very first day. And while we were all trying to go in, we brought all our purses and bags in the whole first day. It was never limited. It was day 2 and 3, like after they had time to talk about it or something. But so it just seemed to me that there was like the strategy of let's make everybody as uncomfortable as possible. And, I might have left more stuff in the car had I known. If it was the same across the whole Capitol building, it just made it hard. I brought lunches in my backpack with the kids. It's not like you can just leave. There was hundreds of people there. And I would like to trust most of them would be honest patriots, but I don't know them personally, and so I can't trust.
Well, and if you know places, there's certain places I'll go, I know I'll bring ID, cash, keys, phone. That's it, but you kind of need to know ahead of time so you can secure your purse. You can
prepare, exactly. Not bring it in or whatever, right? And that's how I felt. I would have left things in my hotel room had I known or whatever. So that was frustrating. So when you are only seeing the little bit that, the TV is showing about the meeting, and then you hear the drama and the accounts of other things happening, and you don't put them into context, it isn't really fair to judge people that weren't there, or judge people that were there by people that weren't there, and say that, we were all these crazy, loud, obnoxious, disrespectful people. When you look at all the pieces, it felt like they did not want us there, and if they pushed hard enough this time, maybe we wouldn't come back. And I don't like to think that everybody there thought that or had that intention. I do feel pretty strongly that there were a handful of people that did feel that they did not want us there, and if they could make us uncomfortable, maybe we just wouldn't come back. So I would like to see the next legislative session have very clear rules. It did say I wish I would have gotten a picture of it. I know someone else did. I saw them taking pictures of the sign outside that said we reserve the right to change the rules at any time. That was a sign outside the gallery.
Well, then there should also be an addendum. Then they can't expect the public to follow the rules if they're random and they change every day.
Right.
Or to not expect to have to re-explain yourself every day to go, that wasn't working yesterday. We're going to try this today because that would be reasonable, but then you need to take the time to explain that.
And every morning they could have said, we had this incident happen yesterday, so for the safety of blah, 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 we decided we're not going to allow bags in here or whatever, right? If there was an incident. People were open carrying guns in the gallery, so I don't think it was a safety issue. I really believe...
And a lot of the senators and House representatives carry.
I know. So, if it was a safety thing, that's what I was thinking too. Then
just put up a sign or say, we'll give an extra 10 minutes because...
Yes. Or we don't have enough staff to clean, so don't bring food and drinks in, or whatever it is.
Or ISP's uncomfortable with the amount of bags. If you're able to, please leave your bag in your car or somewhere else.
So I think those all things that could be addressed better. And so if any legislative members take the time to watch something like this, I don't feel I'm a special person in any way, shape, or form. I just have a story to tell, and if they do watch this, I would like that there are set rules and that you don't change them. Just leave them to the public that every day as people change, people came every day that weren't there the day before, who heard about it and said, I better show up, just didn't understand that the rules were changing all the time and they were equally frustrated. We need to just have a set of rules and just leave it the same. There don't have to be laws. It doesn't have to be written into law for this. Just this is basic decorum, list it on the board, and then leave it the same.
And the thing that I learned from you is I'm not a big fan of Bundy. Most people know that when they know me. But to hear your point of view on his thing.
Yeah.
He's not this ringleader.
Exactly.
Weirdo.
Right.
That if you watched all the mainstream media, that's immediately what it was all about. And I knew it wasn't all about him, but to hear from your point of view that he had been pressed and then he wasn't. That's a reasonable thing to go, wait a minute, what the heck?
Right. Well, and to see that we're not all a bunch of followers. I saw a video of a rep say that he thought we were all Bundy followers and that we were all there to create chaos and to riot. Yeah. And I thought, that really offends me as a citizen of Idaho because I have my own brain. I could think for myself, and I didn't show up there for him or anybody else. I went for myself because I realized I've been too complacent in the process up to this point. I'm 41 years old, and I should not have been complacent. Part of what's going on is my fault. I did not speak up. I was not involved in this process, and if I don't like it, rather than complain about it, I should get involved. And that's why I went down there, as I realized this year I got to stop complaining and put my money where my mouth is and get involved. And so I went down there to see the process. And I could tell you, it's kind of like when they say like a Spanish immersion program where you just get dumped into a place where you have to speak Spanish and you have to learn it or you don't. And that's how I felt with this experience for me. It was an immersion process. I was immersing myself and my kids in this process to teach them what it is firsthand. Because there's these charts down in the basement of the Capitol. There's just this like round area in the center, and they have all these educational pieces up there. It was really cool. I tell people now you should go to the Capitol and see it. It's kind of fascinating to see the history of Idaho. But it talks about the legislative process, and it gives bullet points and pictures, and it kind of gives examples. I read that while I was there trying to live through the legislative process. And I can tell you, it did not help me to read that board. It was very confusing. And even somebody who understood it better than me, I asked her opinion. I'd seen her there a lot. And I had asked her, and she said, well, let's go through and point out and talk about it, you know. And even her, she said, oh, this doesn't follow right. This isn't right based on what we're doing. And so it was immersing yourself in the process and learning it by living it. And it was a really powerful experience that taught me so much. And it changed my opinions on a lot of things that I didn't understand that I was angry about, that I'm no longer angry about, because I see the process. I see how hard it is for these legislative reps to go through this day on, day on. And I can imagine 3 months of this straight would be so daunting. Because by the end of the 3 days, I was exhausted mentally and emotionally from trying to process information, debate it, talk about it, see points of views that I didn't have before. It was exhausting, Summer. I can't believe how hard it was. They do this for 3 months. And I asked one of them, why don't you guys meet once a quarter and discuss passing legislation and bills once a quarter? They don't have to be 3 months in a row. And she said that's why some of the bills, I won't say what her name was, but that's why some of the bills that are the sneaky ones that probably shouldn't get passed through at the end of the legislative session, because people are too tired and they know that, and they can pass things because they're just simply too tired to debate it any longer. And so they give in on things they might not have given in on when they weren't so tired. And so now I feel like my bleeding heart goes out to these legislative members who are trying to do the right thing, who simply get exhausted. They're humans.
Well, quite a few of them take a nice vacation
afterwards.
Right after.
Are you kidding me?
The session's over.
You would need a month vacation.
Yeah.
Because it is mentally and emotionally exhausting. And so I believe that the people of Idaho need to be supporting the people who are willing to speak up for us, and to show them your support. Write them letters, email them, call them.
Pray for them.
Pray for them. Thank them for what they're doing, because it is really hard to fight this battle. And the ones that are not fighting for the people of Idaho, who are sitting back and just collecting a paycheck, we really do need to vote them out. We need people who are willing to run against them. I know a lot of these people are running unopposed. Okay, they're going to get in and just keep doing what they're doing because no one's saying they should do any different. We need people who have the time. I have kids. I can't take the time to run as a Senate person. I don't have enough knowledge to even to feel like I could do that. But there's got to be people in Idaho who are seasoned Idahoans, or people that have a strong opinion about the way things are going in Idaho, who can run up against these people and get them out. And one thing I wanted to say that I want people to hear is, if they're running unopposed and you don't agree with them, don't fill in the bubble. You don't have to. Because if we saw the real numbers of people who actually support these senators and these reps, maybe it's much smaller than we think. And if people saw that they didn't have as much support, they might have the courage to run against them in the next election. Because they might realize people don't really support them. They're just nobody else willing to do the job. And I think if we could see the real numbers, that might be encouragement to people in Idaho just to stand up and say, I'll do the job. I'm willing to go offer to give my time, and I'll try to do this and speak for Idahoans. Because I'm sure the job's not an easy job, but we should stop just settling because no one's deciding to run. And it's too much work. It's too hard. I don't know if I want to do it. I don't feel smart enough. If I didn't have kids and the responsibility that I have, I might run for something because I would have the time to do that. And there's plenty of Idahoans I know that would have the time, that just need to get out of their comfort zone and say, I'm willing to speak for Idaho. I'll do the job. I have thick skin. I can take this on. I care about Idaho and its future and things that happen here. So don't fill the bubble in. If you don't agree with them and you haven't researched them, don't fill it in. It's not going to hurt anything. No one's running against them. They're already going to get in.
No matter the position.
Yeah, no matter the position. The committee member, it doesn't matter who it is. Don't fill it in if you don't agree, because at that point, we don't know what the real numbers are. We don't know what the real support is for those people. So, and if we had to recall them, it's much easier to recall when you have less numbers to get, because it goes based on who votes for them. It's how many recall votes you have to be able to get them out.
Yep.
So that's something I learned this year as well. So don't fill the bubble in.